3 years after I qualified, I think there were 3 unmarried physiotherapists of my years left in New Zealand. They'd all gone off to Britain, and that's what was done in those days. We talked about going home. Everybody seemed to do it. And so I got a ship and booked a passage on a liner, and over we went to Britain. I registered with the Chartered Society when I first got there, and then went on to Edinburgh and did mainly relieving work while I was in Edinburgh. I worked at the Edinburgh Sick Children's Hospital and the City Hospital that treated all their chest patients and polio. And then I did a 10-week stint at the Thistle Foundation, which was a hospital housing complex that was designed and built specifically for spinal injuries, post-spinal injuries after the war. And the patients all lived there with their families. Some went out to work, some were employed by Monroe Spun making sock tops in part of the hospital there. And I worked there for 10 weeks, in which time I was expected to instruct people on wheelchair manoeuvrability, teach them to swim, help them with their archery, none of which I knew anything about. And my patients helped me greatly. They'd all been through Stoke Mandeville, so were very skilled. We treated all the other ancillary things that came along as well, but it was quite an amazing place. About 100 houses, all linked up by terraces down to the main block, where there was physiotherapy, OT, and a huge big area that was used by Monroe Spun, but should have been a gymnasium, a swimming pool, a church that was very beautiful and beautiful carvings on all the seats. It was a memorial chapel to a lord. Not sure, he had something to do with tyres, and his son was killed in the last day of the war, and so he built this whole complex. But I was there for 10 weeks and then went to London. And yes, I applied to go to Hammersmith Hospital because there'd been some New Zealanders there before me who had enjoyed it there. And when I got there, I handed over my references, and my future boss, Joyce Morris, said to me, "Oh, I don't think I need those. The mere fact that you're a New Zealander is enough for us." So I give credit to the people that went before me. One of them was killed in a bus accident going through to Austria when an avalanche came down and swept the bus off the road. She had been one of my supervisors when I was a student, and the other one came back and worked in New Zealand as a physiotherapist. But they set the standard, so we were made very welcome. And I worked there for 3 years, and there I did all the usual things, working in outpatients and in the gymnasium, which was the last place in the hospital to receive the heat. It was a huge big barn of a place. We had masses of people come in with multiple sclerosis being brought in by the ambulance each week. I can remember I'd never seen so many people with MS. And then I was detailed to be the physiotherapist in the cardiac surgical ward. There we had the first British invention of the heart-lung machine. Mr. Bentel had invented it, and he was, I think that's the correct name, he worked at Hammersmith. And our surgeon, I'm trying to think of his name, but he came, he also operated. There were 2 of them. There was the head one, who came from King's, so he was using an American machine there, and Mr. Bromley, who also worked at St. Mary's. The physicians really gave us the very dregs of patients to operate on. They really wouldn't have survived much longer. I spent sometimes several months giving them, pre-opping them more or less, keeping their chests clear, giving them breathing exercises and so on, until they got the okay from the physician to go ahead with the surgery. Quite a number died, and I think they found that there was a problem. They went right through the surgery. I was there present in the theatre quite often, and they would go right through the surgery, and very often in the recovery ward they would start to fibrillate, and they died. And it was something, I gather, to do with the oxygenating or the heating of the blood when it was external to the body, and when it went back they were connected up again. This shock occurred. After we'd lost quite a number of patients, they took the machine off for a while, and I know that I got the Asian flu at that time and came back to New Zealand, and my successor wrote to me and said that they're celebrating their 100th success or something, and that she'd been to Switzerland to teach the physios what to do, and then she went to Moscow. So I missed out on all that. Bad timing, but it was very demanding work there again. And Hammersmith, because it was the postgraduate medical school, had people coming in from every corner of the world for treatment, because the doctors would go there to study, they'd go back to their countries, they'd find a patient that would benefit from treatment from one of the surgeons. Some of the abdominal surgery and esophageal surgery and things like that were done by Mr. Franklin, and he was known worldwide, and these people would come through. So I would go to the ward, and the sister would say, well, how's your Portuguese, or what do you like on Turkish, or how's your Greek? I can remember all these people coming through, and it was interesting. Very difficult at times. I had a patient with cancer of the lung. I remember that they wanted specific postural drainage for, and I couldn't speak a word of Portuguese. He was from the Azores. He was a doctor, but he couldn't understand why I was manhandling him, bashing him about. We had to get an interpreter in because he refused all treatment. So once the interpreter had been in, it all was straightened out and we became friends. But it was difficult, and you didn't know the language. So I worked there. I was also doing a wee bit of research for the physicians over in the medical wards, and we were trying to see if we could pick up the phrenic nerve and stimulate it to get better diaphragmatic breathing. Well, we did, but we had got a silver electrode made so that it was less painful, it was a better conductor. And I used to have some very courageous physiotherapists be my guinea pigs while we tried to get this. And then the doctor that we tried to convince, he said, but how do I know they're not doing diaphragmatic breathing? How do I know that it's completely involuntary? And I said, well, I'll do it to you. Oh, no, you won't. And I said, well, what am I doing this for? And it petered out, but I'd love to have gone further with it because it was interesting. It was definitely, they all said that, and they tried it on me, but we didn't do it because we didn't have positive pressure machines. We had to think of all sorts of things outside the square, and that was one thing that I got into over there. So I came back in 1958, back to New Zealand. I was married by that time and went back to work as a supervisor at the hospital in Dunedin. But became pregnant, and so I worked through my pregnancy, and then I stopped. And my husband died 6 months after my daughter was born, so I didn't go back to work until she went to kindergarten. So I was able to work for 9 hours a week before they started taking my widow's pension away from me. So eventually I did that for a while. It was most unsatisfactory trying to supervise students when you're only there for 9 hours and having a staff member doing the work the rest of the time. So I managed to get a job as a physiotherapist to a physically handicapped school where I had school hours and school holidays. We stopped there for a wee while.